The barn smelled of old hay and rain-soaked wood. Corporal James Sullivan pushed the door open with the barrel of his M1 Garand, slow, deliberate, his breath visible in the cold March air. Outside, the village of Hartberg lay silent under a gray sky, its streets empty, its windows dark. The war had passed through here like a wildfire, leaving only ash and echoes. He stepped inside. Light fell through gaps in the roof, slicing the darkness into uneven shapes. Dust floated in the beams, suspended, weightless. His boots scraped against the floor, and somewhere in the rafters, a bird startled and flew away, its wings beating hard against the stillness. James stopped, listened. There was something else, a sound beneath the silence, breathing, shallow, careful, human. His grip tightened on the rifle. He scanned the interior, broken stalls, overturned buckets, a rusted plow leaning against the wall. His pulse quickened. He'd been through too many barns, too many basements, too many rooms where the enemy waited in the dark. But this felt different. This felt fragile. "Come out," he said, his voice low, steady. "I'm not going to hurt you. Nothing." He moved deeper into the barn, his eyes adjusting to the dimness. Then he saw it, a pile of hay near the back wall. Too neat, too deliberate. He approached slowly, his rifle raised, his finger resting just outside the trigger guard. "I said come out." The hay shifted. A hand appeared first, pale, trembling, fingers spread as if in surrender. Then a face emerged. A woman's face, dirt-streaked, hollow-eyed, framed by tangled blonde hair. She looked up at him, and for a moment, neither of them moved. She was young, maybe 25, maybe younger. Her dress was torn at the shoulder, her arms scratched and bruised. She didn't speak. She just stared at him, her chest rising and falling too fast, her eyes wide with fear and exhaustion. James lowered the rifle slightly, just enough to show he wasn't going to shoot. "Do you speak English?" She nodded once, slow, uncertain. "What's your name?" Her lips parted, but no sound came. She swallowed, tried again. "Elise," she whispered. Her voice was rough, unused. "Elise Becker." He studied her face, searching for any sign of deception, any flicker of hostility. But all he saw was terror, and something deeper, resignation, as if she'd already accepted whatever came next. "Are you alone?" She nodded again. "Why are you hiding here?" She closed her eyes, and for a moment, he thought she might faint. But then she opened them again, and when she spoke, her voice was barely audible. "Because they will kill me." James frowned. "Who?" "Everyone." The word hung in the air between them, heavy, final. He glanced at the doorway, then back at her. Outside, his unit was moving through the village, clearing houses, checking for stragglers. He should call them, he should bring her in, let the officers handle it. But something stopped him. He lowered the rifle completely, letting it hang at his side. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said again, slower this time, as if the words themselves could build a bridge between them. She didn't move, didn't believe him. Why would she? James crouched down, bringing himself to her level. The gesture felt awkward, vulnerable, but he did it anyway. He unslung his canteen from his belt and held it out to her. "Here, you look like you need water." She stared at the canteen as if it were a weapon. Her hands remained at her sides, fists clenched in the hay. "It's just water," he said softly. "I promise." Finally, slowly, she reached out. Her fingers brushed his as she took the canteen, and he felt how cold her skin was, how she was shaking. She unscrewed the cap with trembling hands and drank too fast, too desperate. Water spilled down her chin, and she wiped it away with the back of her hand. When she finished, she handed it back to him. "Thank you," she whispered. "When's the last time you ate?" She looked away. "I don't remember." James pulled a ration bar from his pack and offered it to her. She hesitated again, then took it, breaking off a piece and chewing slowly, as if her body had forgotten how. He watched her in the dim light, this woman who should have been his enemy, who should have been nothing to him. But all he saw was someone who'd been hiding in a barn for God knows how long, starving, terrified, waiting for the war to decide her fate. "Why did you say they'll kill you?" he asked. She stopped chewing. Her eyes met his, and in them he saw the weight of something unspeakable. "Because I am German," she said quietly. "Because I was born here. Because I exist. The Allies aren't. Not the Allies." Her voice cracked. "My own people." James felt a chill run through him. "What do you mean?" She looked down at her hands, at the ration bar she was still holding. "I helped someone," she said. "A Jewish family. I hid them in my cellar for 8 months. The Gestapo found out. They took the family. They came for me too, but I ran." She paused, her breath hitching. "My neighbors, the ones who reported me, they said if they ever saw me again, they would hang me themselves. So, I hid. I have been hiding for 3 weeks." The barn felt colder. James sat back on his heels, trying to process what she'd just told him. 3 weeks. Alone. Starving. Hunted by her own people. "Why didn't you leave the village?" "Where would I go?" Her voice was hollow. "The roads are full of soldiers. The woods are full of bodies. There is nowhere safe for someone like me." James didn't know what to say. He'd seen a lot of things in this war. Destruction, death, cruelty beyond measure. But this was different. This was the kind of quiet tragedy that didn't make it into reports, the kind that disappeared into the rubble and was never spoken of again. Outside, voices called to each other in English. His unit was moving closer. Elise heard them too. Her body went rigid, her eyes darting toward the door. "They will take me," she said, her voice rising with panic. "They will put me in a camp, or they will send me back to the village, and then—" "No." James's voice was firm. He reached out, almost touching her shoulder, then stopped himself. "I won't let that happen." She stared at him, disbelief written across her face. "Why would you help me? You do not even know me." He didn't have an answer. Or maybe he did. But it was too complicated to put into words. Something about the way she'd looked at him when she first emerged from the hay. Something about the fact that she hadn't fought, hadn't tried to run, had simply surrendered to whatever came next. Something about the quiet courage it took to hide a Jewish family when the entire world was telling you to turn them in. "Because it's the right thing to do," he said finally. Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't let them fall. "You will get in trouble. Let me worry about that." Footsteps echoed outside the barn. Closer now. James stood quickly, his mind racing. He needed a plan, and he needed it fast. "Stay here," he said. "Don't make a sound." He walked to the doorway just as Sergeant Bill Archer appeared, his rifle slung over his shoulder, a cigarette dangling from his lips. "Sullivan, what are you doing in there?" "Just checking it out, Sarge. It's clear." Archer squinted past him into the darkness. "You sure? Thought I heard something." "Just rats," James said, keeping his voice casual. "Place is full of them." Archer grunted. "All right, we're moving to the next sector. Finish up and catch up with us." "Will do." Archer lingered for a moment, his eyes narrowing slightly, as if he sensed something off. But then he shrugged and walked away, his boots crunching on the gravel road. James waited until the footsteps faded, then turned back to the barn. Elise was standing now, half hidden behind a support beam, her face pale in the shadows. "You lied for me," she said, her voice filled with wonder and fear. "Yeah, why?" He met her gaze. "Because you didn't resist." She blinked, confused. "When I found you," he continued, "you could have fought. You could have run. But you didn't. You just surrendered. And I don't know, maybe that says something about you. Maybe that says you're not the enemy." Her lip trembled. "I do not know what I am anymore." "You're someone who deserves a chance," James said. "That's enough for now." She looked at him for a long moment, and something shifted in her expression, something fragile and dangerous, like the first crack in ice, trust, or the beginning of it. "What happens now?" she asked. James glanced out at the village, then back at her. "Now we figure out how to keep you alive." The afternoon light was fading when James returned to the barn, a pack slung over his shoulder. Elise was sitting in the same spot, her knees drawn to her chest, her arms wrapped around them. She looked up when he entered. and he saw the flicker of relief in her eyes. "I brought food," he said, setting the pack down. "And a blanket. It's not much, but it'll keep you warm tonight." She watched as he unpacked the supplies: bread, canned meat, a tin of peaches, a wool blanket that smelled faintly of mothballs. When he handed her the blanket, she held it like it was something precious, her fingers brushing over the fabric. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded, sitting down across from her, keeping a respectful distance. "You need to stay hidden for a few more days. My unit's moving out tomorrow, but there'll be others coming through. MPs, supply convoys. If anyone finds you—" "I know," she said quietly. "I will be careful." They sat in silence for a moment, the only sound the wind rattling the barn's loose boards. James studied her in the fading light, noticing details he'd missed before the way. Her hands never stopped moving, twisting the edge of the blanket, picking at a loose thread. The way her eyes darted toward the door every time the wind shifted. She was like a trapped animal, every muscle coiled, ready to run. "Tell me about them," he said suddenly. She looked up, startled. "Who?" "The family you hid." Her expression softened, and for the first time, he saw something other than fear in her eyes. "The Goldsteins," she said. "David and Miriam and their 2 children, Sarah and Jakob. They lived 3 houses down from me. We were not close, but we knew each other. When the deportation started, Miriam came to my door one night. She was crying. She said they had nowhere else to go." Elise paused, her voice thick with emotion. "I did not think. I just let them in." 8 months is a long time." "It was," she said. "Every day, I thought someone would find out. Every knock on the door, every footstep outside, I thought it was the end. But I kept going because I looked at those children, and I thought, if I do nothing, they will die. And I could not live with that." James felt something tighten in his chest. "What happened to them?" Her face crumpled. "The Gestapo took them. I do not know where. I heard later that they were sent east to one of the camps. I do not know if they are still alive." "I'm sorry," she shook her head. "Do not be sorry. I am not. I would do it again." Her voice broke. "I just wish I could have saved them." The barn was darker now, the light almost gone. James could barely see her face, but he could hear the anguish in her voice, the guilt that was eating her alive. "You did save them," he said. "For 8 months, you gave them a chance. That's more than most people did." She looked at him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "But it was not enough." "It never is," he said quietly. "But it still matters." They sat in the growing darkness, 2 strangers bound by war and circumstance, and for the first time since he'd arrived in Europe, James felt like he understood something fundamental about this conflict. It wasn't just about armies and borders and flags. It was about people like Elise, who'd risked everything for strangers. It was about the small, quiet acts of courage that no one would ever hear about. "What about you?" she asked suddenly. "Why are you here?" James hesitated. "I enlisted after Pearl Harbor. Wanted to do my part, I guess." "And have you?" He laughed bitterly. "I don't know. I've seen a lot of death. I've done things I'm not proud of. I don't know if any of it matters." "It matters," she said softly. "You saved me today. That matters." He looked at her, surprised by the certainty in her voice. "I haven't saved you yet." "Yes, you have." The way she said it made something shift inside him, something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope, maybe, or just the fragile possibility of it. "You should eat," he said, gesturing to the food. "I'll come back tomorrow." She nodded, pulling the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "James?" He paused at the doorway, turning back. "Thank you," she said, "for seeing me." He didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded and stepped out into the night. The next 3 days followed the same pattern. James would slip away from his unit during meal breaks, during downtime, whenever he could find an excuse, and bring Elise food, water, news from the outside world. Each time, he stayed a little longer. Each time, they talked a little more. He learned that she'd been a teacher before the war, that she loved music but hadn't played piano in years, that her parents had died when she was young and she'd grown up alone. She learned that he was from a small town in Pennsylvania, that he had a younger sister he missed desperately, that he'd wanted to be a journalist before the war changed everything. They talked about everything except the obvious: what would happen when his unit moved on, when she ran out of hiding places, when the fragile bubble of safety he'd created around her finally burst. On the fourth day, everything changed. James arrived at the barn in the late afternoon, carrying a pack full of supplies. But the moment he stepped inside, he knew something was wrong. The air felt different, charged, tense. Elise was standing near the back wall, her body rigid, her eyes wide with terror. "What's wrong?" he asked, moving toward her. She pointed to the ground. There, in the dirt, was a footprint. Fresh. Not hers. Not his. His blood ran cold. Someone was here. She nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "This morning, I heard them outside, talking. They did not come in, but they were looking for something. Or someone." James cursed under his breath. "Did you see who it was?" "No. But I heard German. They were speaking German." His mind raced. If locals were searching the area, it was only a matter of time before they found her. He couldn't keep her here. He needed to move her, get her somewhere safer. But where? The village was crawling with soldiers and civilians. And beyond it, the countryside was a war zone. "We need to leave," he said. "Tonight. And go where? I don't know yet. But we'll figure it out." She looked at him, and he saw the fear in her eyes, but also something else, a desperate, fragile trust. "You do not have to do this," she said. "You have already done so much. I'm not leaving you here. If they catch you helping me, they won't." She took a step closer, and in the dim light, he could see every detail of her face. The exhaustion, the fear, the faint hope that she was trying so hard to keep alive. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Why do you care?" James didn't have an answer. Or maybe he did, but it was something he couldn't say out loud yet, something that was still forming in the space between them. "Because I can't walk away," he said finally. "I tried. I told myself it's not my problem, that you're not my responsibility. But every time I leave here, all I can think about is you alone in this barn, waiting for someone to find you. And I can't." He stopped, his throat tight. "I can't let that happen." Elise's eyes filled with tears. "I do not deserve this," she whispered. "I do not deserve you. You deserve a hell of a lot more than hiding in a barn." She reached out then, her hand trembling, and touched his arm. It was the first time she'd touched him voluntarily, and the contact sent a shock through him, electric and grounding all at once. "If we do this," she said, "if we leave, there is no going back. You will be risking everything." "I know. And you are willing to do that? For me?" He looked into her eyes, and in that moment, he realized the truth. He wasn't doing this just because it was the right thing. He was doing it because somewhere in the past 4 days, this woman had become more than a stranger, more than a mission. She'd become someone he couldn't imagine leaving behind. "Yes," he said, "I am." She stared at him for a long moment, and then slowly, she nodded. "Then we go tonight." They waited until dark. James returned to his unit, acting as normal as he could, eating dinner with the other men, laughing at their jokes, pretending everything was fine. But his mind was elsewhere, running through the plan over and over, searching for holes, for risks, for anything that could go wrong. At midnight, he slipped out of the billet, moving through the shadows like a ghost. The village was quiet, most of the soldiers asleep or on perimeter duty. He made his way to the barn, his heart pounding, every sound amplified in the stillness. Elise was waiting for him, the blanket wrapped around her shoulders, a small bundle at her feet, everything she owned in the world, which wasn't much. "Are you ready?" he asked. She nodded, though he could see the fear in her eyes. "We're going to head east," he said. "There's a farmhouse about 5 miles from here. It's abandoned, but it'll give us shelter for a few days while I figure out the next step. And if someone sees us, they won't." He hoped that was true. They left the barn and moved through the village, sticking to the shadows, avoiding the main roads. Elise stayed close to him, her footsteps almost silent. her breathing controlled. She'd learned how to be invisible, how to move through a world that wanted her dead. They were almost clear of the village when they heard voices. James grabbed Elise's arm, pulling her into an alley between two buildings. They pressed against the wall, barely breathing, as two soldiers walked past, their voices low, their cigarettes glowing in the dark. James felt Elise trembling beside him. He reached out, his hand finding hers, and squeezed gently. She squeezed back, holding on like he was the only solid thing in a world that was constantly shifting. The soldiers moved on, and James waited another minute before leading Elise out of the alley. They continued through the village, past burned-out buildings and shattered windows, past the ghosts of lives that had been lived here before the war tore everything apart. When they finally reached the edge of the village, James felt a small measure of relief, but it was short-lived. The countryside stretched out before them, dark and dangerous, every shadow a potential threat. They walked in silence, following a narrow path through the fields. The moon was hidden behind clouds, and the only light came from the distant glow of fires, still burning somewhere to the west. Elise stumbled once, and James caught her, his arm around her waist, holding her steady. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I am not used to walking so far." "We're almost there," he said, though he had no idea if that was true. They continued, step by step, mile by mile, two figures moving through the darkness, bound by something neither of them fully understood yet. The farmhouse was exactly as James remembered, it isolated, half-collapsed, forgotten. They slipped inside, and James used his flashlight to survey the space. It wasn't much a single room with a dirt floor, a broken table, a fireplace choked with debris. But it had walls and a roof, and that was enough. Elise sank to the floor, exhausted, her body shaking from cold and adrenaline. James built a small fire, carefully, using dry wood so the smoke wouldn't give them away. When the flames caught, he sat down beside her, and they both stared into the fire, neither speaking. "We made it," Elise said finally, her voice filled with disbelief. "We did." She turned to look at him, her face illuminated by the firelight. "I do not know how to thank you." "You don't have to." "But I want to." She hesitated, then reached out and took his hand. Her fingers were cold, but her grip was firm. "You saved my life, James. Not just today, but every day since you found me." He looked down at their joined hands, and something inside him cracked open. "I didn't want to lose you," he said quietly. "I couldn't." "Why?" she asked, her voice barely audible. He met her eyes, and in that moment, he knew he couldn't hide from the truth anymore. "Because somewhere along the way, you stopped being a stranger," he said. "And now I can't imagine a world where you're not in it." Her breath caught. Tears spilled down her cheeks, and she didn't bother wiping them away. "I feel the same," she whispered. "I did not want to. I told myself it was impossible, that we are from different worlds, that this war would tear us apart. But I cannot stop it. I cannot stop feeling this." James reached up, his hand cupping her face, his thumb brushing away her tears. "Then don't," he said. "Don't stop." She leaned into his touch, her eyes closing. And for a moment, the war, the danger, the impossibility of it all, none of it mattered. There was only this, only them. When she opened her eyes again, they were filled with something raw and vulnerable. "What happens to us?" she asked. "When the war ends? When you have to leave?" "I don't know," he admitted, "but I know I'm not leaving you behind. Whatever happens, we'll face it together." She smiled then, fragile and beautiful, and James felt something shift inside him, something fundamental and irreversible. He was in love with her. He didn't know when it had happened, maybe the first time he saw her emerge from the hay, maybe when she told him about the family she'd saved, maybe in one of the quiet moments they'd shared in the barn. But it had happened, and now there was no going back. "Together," she repeated, as if testing the word. "I like that." He leaned forward, and she met him halfway, their lips touching in a kiss that was soft and hesitant and filled with everything they couldn't say. When they pulled apart, they stayed close, foreheads touching, breathing the same air. "Stay with me," she whispered. Always, he said. And in that moment, in that broken farmhouse, in the middle of a war-torn country, they found something neither of them had expected to find: hope. Not the distant, abstract kind, but something immediate and real, something they could hold on to in the darkness. The days that followed were stolen moments, fragile and precious. James continued to report to his unit, but every chance he got, he returned to the farmhouse. He brought food, supplies, news from the front, but more than that, he brought himself, his stories, his laughter, his fears. Elise opened up to him in ways she never had before. She told him about her childhood, about the piano lessons she'd loved, about the teacher she'd wanted to become. She told him about the day the Goldsteins were taken, how she'd watched from a window as they were loaded into trucks, how Miriam had looked back at her one last time, her eyes filled with terror and gratitude. "I think about them every day," she said one evening, as they sat by the fire. "I wonder if they are still alive, if they remember me, if they know I tried." "They know," James said, "and wherever they are, I promise you, they're grateful." She leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder, and he wrapped his arm around her, holding her close. It felt natural now, this intimacy, as if they'd known each other for years instead of weeks. "What will you do after the war?" she asked. "I don't know," he said honestly. "I used to have plans. College, a job at a newspaper. But now I can't imagine going back to that life. Not after everything I've seen." "You will find a new path," she said. "You are strong, James. Stronger than you think." "What about you?" She was quiet for a long moment. "I do not know if I have a future," she said finally. "I am a German who helped Jews. I am a traitor to my people, a criminal to the Nazis and to the Allies. I am just another enemy. Where do I belong?" "With me," he said without hesitation. "You belong with me." She turned to look at him, her eyes searching his face. "You cannot mean that." "I do. But how? Your country? Your family?" "I'll figure it out," he said. "I don't care where we have to go or what we have to do. I'm not losing you, Elise." She stared at him, and he saw the war raging inside her, the desire to believe him, the fear that it was impossible, the desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, he was right. "I love you," he said, the words spilling out before he could stop them. "I know it's crazy, I know it's fast, but I don't care. I love you, and I'm not taking it back." Her eyes filled with tears. "James, you don't have to say it back," he said quickly. "I just needed you to know." She reached up, her hand cupping his face, and when she spoke, her voice was steady and sure. "I love you too," she said. "I have loved you since the day you gave me water and called me something other than an enemy. You are the only good thing that has come from this war." He kissed her then, deep and desperate, pouring everything he felt into that kiss. She kissed him back with equal intensity, her hands tangling in his hair, her body pressed against his. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathless, their hearts pounding in sync. "Promise me something," she whispered. "Anything. Promise me that no matter what happens, you will not forget this. You will not forget me." "I could never forget you," he said. "You're part of me now." She smiled, and it was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. But reality has a way of intruding, even on the most perfect moments. On the 10th day, James arrived at the farmhouse to find Elise pacing, her face pale, her hands shaking. "What's wrong?" he asked, immediately on alert. "Someone was here," she said, her voice tight with fear. "They did not come inside, but I saw them through the window. 2 men, German civilians. They were looking at the house, talking. I think they suspect something." James's mind raced. "Did they see you?" "I do not think so. But James, if they come back, we need to leave," he said. "Now." "And go where? We cannot keep running forever." He knew she was right. They couldn't keep doing this, hiding, running, living on borrowed time. He needed a real solution, something permanent, and there was only one option left. "I'm going to get you out of Germany," he said. "I'm going to get you to Allied territory, somewhere safe." "How?" "I have no papers, No identification. The moment someone asks me who I am, then we don't give them the chance to ask, he said. We'll move at night. Stick to back roads. It'll take time, but we'll make it. She looked at him, and he saw the doubt in her eyes, the fear that this was just another impossible dream. But beneath it, he also saw hope, stubborn, fragile, refusing to die. You really think we can do this? She asked. I know we can. She took a deep breath, then nodded. All right. When do we leave? Tomorrow night. I'll gather supplies, plan a route. We'll head west, toward the American lines. Once we're there, You can what? She interrupted. Tell them you found a German woman and decided to save her? They will not understand, James. They will think you are a traitor or a fool. Let them think what they want, he said. I don't care. But I care, she said, her voice breaking. I care that you are risking everything for me. I care that you could be court-martialed, or worse. I care that you have given up so much, and I have given you nothing in return. You've given me everything, he said, taking her hands in his. You've given me a reason to keep going. You've reminded me that there's still good in this world, still something worth fighting for. That's not nothing, Elise. That's everything. She collapsed against him, sobbing, and he held her, his own eyes burning with unshed tears. They stayed like that for a long time, clinging to each other, two people who'd found something beautiful in the middle of hell and refused to let it go. The next night, they began their journey west. James had stolen a map from the command post, and he'd traced a route that would take them through the countryside, avoiding major roads and checkpoints. It would be dangerous, but it was their only chance. They traveled in silence, moving through fields and forests, sleeping in abandoned barns and ruined houses. Every sound made them jump, every shadow a potential threat. But they kept going, driven by something stronger than fear, love, hope, the stubborn belief that they deserved a future. On the third night, they were crossing a river when they heard voices. James pulled Elise into the undergrowth, and they watched as a patrol passed by American soldiers, their rifles slung over their shoulders, their voices relaxed. We're close, James whispered. The lines must be just ahead. Elise nodded, but he could see the fear in her eyes. They were so close now, but that made it more dangerous, not less. One wrong move, one suspicious glance, and everything could fall apart. They waited until the patrol moved on, then continued, following the river west. The landscape changed gradually. Fewer ruins, more signs of life. They were crossing from the devastated east into territory that had been liberated months ago, where the war felt like a distant memory rather than an immediate threat. Finally, as dawn broke on the fourth day, they saw at a checkpoint, American flags flying, soldiers checking papers and waving vehicles through. James and Elise crouched in the trees, watching. This was it, the moment of truth. What do we do? Elise whispered. James thought fast. He couldn't just walk up with her. They'd ask questions, demand papers, and when they realized she was German, it would all be over. He needed a different approach, something that would get her through without raising suspicion. An idea formed, risky and desperate, but it was all he had. Stay here, he said. I'm going to go through the checkpoint, then I'll come back for you. There's a supply truck parked on the other side. If I can get you into the back of it. That is insane, she said. Do you have a better idea? She stared at him, then shook her head. No. Then trust me. He kissed her quickly, fiercely, then stood and walked toward the checkpoint, forcing himself to stay calm, to look like just another soldier returning from patrol. The MP at the gate barely glanced at him, waving him through with a bored expression. James walked past, his heart pounding, and headed for the supply truck. It was loaded with crates of food and ammunition, the back open, unguarded. He glanced around, making sure no one was watching, then slipped into the trees on the far side of the checkpoint. He circled back to where Elise was hiding, moving fast, his mind racing. All right, he said when he reached her. Here's the plan. We're going to wait until that truck is about to leave. Then you're going to slip into the back. I'll be right there with you. Once we're through, we'll figure out the next step. And if we get caught, we won't. She looked at him, and he saw the trust in her eyes, the absolute faith that he would keep her safe. It terrified him and gave him strength all at once. They waited, hidden in the trees, watching as the truck was loaded, as soldiers moved back and forth, as the minutes ticked by with agonizing slowness. Finally, the driver climbed into the cab, and the engine roared to life. "Now," James said. They ran, low and fast, and James boosted Elise into the back of the truck. She scrambled between the crates, and he followed, pulling a tarp over them just as the truck lurched forward. The ride was rough, every bump and turn jostling them against the hard wood, but they stayed silent, barely breathing, as the truck passed through the checkpoint and continued west. After what felt like hours, the truck finally stopped. James peeked out from under the tarp and saw that they were in a depot, surrounded by other vehicles and soldiers. He grabbed Elise's hand and pulled her out the back, and they slipped away into the maze of crates and equipment, moving quickly, staying low. They didn't stop until they reached the edge of the depot, where a line of trees offered cover. Only then did James allow himself to breathe. "We made it," he said, disbelief and relief flooding through him. "We actually made it." Elise stared at him, then started laughing, a sound that was half joy, half hysteria. "I cannot believe that worked." "Neither can I." They stood there, hidden in the trees, and for the first time in weeks, James felt something like safety. They weren't out of danger, yet they still needed papers, a plan, a way to get Elise somewhere she could live without fear. But they'd crossed the first impossible hurdle, and that had to count for something. "What now?" Elise asked. James thought for a moment, then smiled. "Now we'd disappear." Over the next few weeks, James worked every contact he had, called in every favor, lied, bribed, and manipulated his way through the bureaucracy. He got Elise false papers, claiming she was a French refugee displaced by the war. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough to get her into a displaced persons camp in the American zone, where she could stay while he figured out the next step. He visited her as often as he could, sneaking away from his unit, risking court-martial with every visit. But he didn't care. Every time he saw her, every time she smiled at him, it was worth it. "I got word from a chaplain," he said one day, sitting beside her in the small room she shared with 3 other women. "He thinks he can help us. If we get married, I can apply to bring you back to the States as my wife." Elise's eyes widened. "Married? I know it's fast," he said quickly. "I know, it's crazy. But it's the only way I can keep you safe. And I want to marry you, Elise. I want to spend the rest of my life with you." She stared at him, tears streaming down her face. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will marry you." He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight, and in that moment, he felt like he could take on the whole world. They were married 2 weeks later in a small ceremony conducted by the chaplain, with 2 soldiers James barely knew serving as witnesses. Elise wore a dress borrowed from another refugee, and James wore his uniform. It wasn't the wedding either of them had imagined, but it was theirs, and that made it perfect. When the chaplain pronounced them husband and wife, James kissed her, and she kissed him back, and for a moment, the war, the chaos, the uncertainty, all of it faded away. "I love you," he whispered against her lips. "I love you too," she said. "Forever." The war ended 3 months later. James was discharged and began the long process of bringing Elise home to Pennsylvania. It took time, paperwork, interviews, but finally, in the fall of 1945, they boarded a ship bound for New York. As the ship pulled away from the dock, Elise stood at the railing, watching Europe disappear behind them. James came up beside her, his arm around her waist. "Are you all right?" he asked. She nodded, though her eyes were wet with tears. "I am saying goodbye," she said, "to everything I was, everything I lost. And hello to everything you'll be," he said, "to the life we're going to build together." She turned to him, and her smile was radiant, filled with hope and love, and the promise of a future they'd fought so hard to claim. Together, she said. Together, he agreed. And as the ship carried them toward a new life, they stood on the deck, holding each other, two survivors of a war that had tried to destroy them, but had instead brought them together. They didn't know what the future held, but they knew they would face it side by side, bound by a love that had been born in darkness and forged in fire. And that was enough.